In September 2001, he travelled to Egypt to study as part of his Arabic and law degree.
I arrived in Egypt one day before the 9/11 attacks, and that sort of affected later on what happened to me there as well. But when I heard about the news of 9/11, I think my initial reaction was one of indifference, to be honest. I was just indifferent to it because I was so angry about the other sort of killings that have been going on in the world. It's only, I think, later on in prison that I started, whilst I was separated from everyone else and I had time to think on my own, that I started fully realizing the implications in terms of the cost of human lives and the cost of human relations.
Hizb-ut-Tahrir is banned in Egypt, and though not expressly there for the party, Majid continued to propagate their ideas while studying in Cairo and was subsequently arrested in April 2002.
I was surprised by a dawn raid. They came in with masks on and machine guns and hand grenades, and they arrested me at gunpoint. And we were subjected to 4 days of torture, whether direct or indirect, having people tortured in front of us. And most of the torture occurred by electrocution. And after the first 4 days, I was put into solitary confinement in cells where there was no sanitation, there were no beds, there was no light, there was no toilet. And we were held in solitary confinement for about 3 months. I began thinking after those initial difficult days that I could perceive myself very easily turning to violence. So I became very close to tipping into allowing for myself terrorism. I didn't sort of allow myself to fully adopt that, but I became dangerously close to that. And when that happened, I had time to sort of then, afterwards in prison, to then reconsider everything I believed in and to try and think, is there a better way than just meeting oppression and anger with more anger?
Last year, Majid Nawaz was released from prison. 4 years in a Cairo cell, away from Hizb-ut-Tahrir and with access to traditional Islamic texts, not party literature, had made him question the theological foundations of what he'd believed for 12 years.
I developed serious doubts in my mind about the ideology of Hizb-ut-Tahrir, and it was very, very difficult for me to come to terms with that because it was as if I was doubting my religion. I regret my whole association with Hizb-ut-Tahrir and the way in which I propagated those ideas. But I also just regret propagating a very politicized version of Islam as if that is the only interpretation of Islam and telling everyone else they're wrong because they didn't agree with the interpretation of the party.
Now Nawaz wants to persuade other members of Hizb-ut-Tahrir to leave the party and has started to publish a series of papers arguing against the theological basis of Hizb-ut-Tahrir ideas.
What I'm trying to do is to present to them the plethora of interpretations within Islam and how it's not just black and white. I need to take responsibility for what I did. I played a large part of the spread of the growth of Islamist ideology in Britain amongst the youth. But I will continue to speak out against the oppression of Muslim leaders, dictators in the Muslim world, because that goes hand in hand.
Despite his criticisms of the party, Majid Nawaz is not joining calls for Hizb-ut-Tahrir to be banned in Britain.
I expressly and explicitly say to the members I want them to leave Hizb-ut-Tahrir because I believe Hizb-ut-Tahrir is an obstacle to the Muslim community moving forward, not only in this country, but in the world in general. My ideal scenario would be not to ban the party, but it would be that through the power of discussion and persuasion, that eventually the party would fizzle out in this country and hopefully generally throughout the world.
In July this year, Majid Nawaz finally graduated from university 10 years after he started his degree.
I'll just chop it now. Yeah, I'll just chop it.
He's back in Southend, restarting his life where he left off at 16.
Muslims in Britain need to start taking responsibility for their society. I don't think we should separate ourselves in this society as a separate faction or a fifth column. I'm British, I'm a British Muslim, and I don't see any contradiction between those two terms.
Well, we invited Hizb-ut-Tahrir to respond to the revelations in that film, but they didn't want to come on. Instead, they told us that opinion poll after opinion poll indicate that the Muslim world today rejects colonialism, whether manifested through occupation or Western-backed dictators, and is firmly behind Islamic political parties like Hizb-ut-Tahrir, who call for the caliphate, a ruling system that reflects Islam's political and moral standards. The increasing propaganda against the caliphate is a last-ditch attempt by Western governments to prop up these ailing dictators. We are happy to say that such attempts will inevitably fail.